I don't know if like historically I've felt this lethargic at this time of year, like post Easter. I don't know, maybe just it was this huge ramp up and all the energy and excitement was poured into Easter, and then right after Easter, I'm just like, ugh, I got nothing left.
Yeah.
I don't remember this, but yeah, I don't know.
It was definitely I set my alarm for 6:45 to get up and go to the gym because nobody has to be anywhere. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go to the gym so I can then take people to school and get to work. I just like laid there. Finally, at like 7, I was like, all right, I'll at least go take a walk or something. But there was no, like, if I would have gone to the gym, I probably would have overcome, but it would have been worthless. Like, I would have gotten to lift weights and been like, yeah, I'll do 10s today because that's what I can handle.
Dude, I saw this thing on TikTok or whatever that was talking about circadian rhythms, how based on the history of mankind that we are all by design very different in whether we're a morning person or not, or an evening person. And circadian rhythms are something that you inherit. You're born with it. And it's apparently extremely difficult to change that. And yet society revolves, at least in America, revolves around morning people's schedule. And we have rewarded that, which with dumb sayings like the early bird gets the worm. I'm like, that's not even true in nature, though. That's not a thing. Like, there's also afternoon birds who also get worms, and they don't have to work extra hard to get them. Like,
Right.
it's just stuff like that I'm like, come on, man.
We can call this episode of the podcast the We're All Tired, How Are You? Episode of the podcast.
Well, on that note, welcome to Sunday Plus.
Welcome to Sunday Plus. Circadian rhythms, bags under our eyes, and well, it is interesting. Like, and I don't know what you've got planned, but the rhythm of celebration and exhaustion go together.
Yeah.
So I think there's a proclivity of just avoiding big moments because we know we don't have the energy afterward, or we've experienced it, but it's worth it.
Or
to
it
do
feels like a downgrade, whatever comes after the big moment.
Yeah, so I mean, it's just a natural slide, but we put all these efforts into these one big moments, and then it's just exhausting for all the other days. And I know people who will avoid, like, well, I'm not going to do something big because I know my energy level is going to be bad. And they'd rather just have a consistency, but they miss the big moments. Versus, I'm usually somebody who's like, yeah, let's do all the big moments, and then I know there's going to be 3 days where I'm just exhausted afterward.
Yeah. Oof. It's I don't know that there's avoiding it though. I mean, I think it's just part of how we're wired.
Yeah, I think so. Well, I mean, it's kind of like Mother's Day is next Sunday.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I got reminded of that by every other post on Instagram.
Oh, really?
That, it's not too late to get this thing for your mom.
We've got 2-day shipping.
Yeah.
But it's coming up. So it's always, not only in our house, but other houses I know, there's kind of the joke of like, what do you want for Mother's Day? And I want, like, the mom wants a locked hotel room with the lights out, the curtains drawn, and Netflix for an entire day by herself.
Yeah.
And then what always ends up happening is some form of celebration where they kind of have to be on, even though they don't want to be.
Yeah.
Or they're enjoying it for a moment. So I think there's just, it's unavoidable because in our culture we have moments of built-in celebration or that we've made to be celebrations, and the pressure that comes with those, well, you have to celebrate well, is very much there. And I think it's higher for some holidays than, can you imagine if we had Christmas come up and we just said, you know what? We're all just going to sit by the fireside, drink cocoa, and watch Christmas movies. That's all we're going to do for Christmas. There would probably be a revolt.
Oh, yeah. Riot.
Yeah.
In-house riot.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because Mother's Day apparently is like the second or third most celebrated holiday in America. You know where Father's Day is on that list?
Oh, I'm sure it's like 20th.
That's actually correct.
Wow.
It's number 20.
It's not like I did weeks of research on this before I came in here.
I don't know. You do work in a church where, for whatever reason, Mother's Day is part of the
it's
gospel.
The high holy. Yeah. I mean, if these big celebration days are there to give us a rhythm of life, Mother's Day has become this massive rhythm of life not as much recently, but it was in the church for a long time.
Yeah, the 90s really set a precedent for how things are supposed to be.
Yeah.
And then we've just kind of inherited as modern church professional, clergy, workers, whatever, that we just have to meet that standard that was set in the 90s and some variation on that.
Right.
Like, I would love to go back and do research and look at all of the components of worship and be like, where did this start?
Right.
When did we start doing this thing? Why is this still a thing? Like,
so I'll try and find the article, but there was some United Methodist that had a hand in starting Mother's Day. So I always joke that like because of United Methodist work toward prohibition, we're secretly behind the increase in income tax. We're also somewhere behind the income. I mean, there's all sorts of like labor laws and stuff that United Methodists are behind back when they were more active in society. Well, we still are, but yeah, Mother's Day. Apparently, some United Methodists had a hand in Mother's Day becoming a thing, like a big thing. So
I'm not surprised by that whatsoever.
We like to meddle in society in good and maybe bad ways.
Yeah.
Not that Mother's Day is a bad thing. I'm not saying that.
No, it's great.
It is interesting, though, that it became a specific church thing. Because Mother's Day is kind of a Hallmark holiday. It's an important holiday. They're important people. But why is that such a high holy holiday in church land versus Father's Day or Siblings Day or something else? Like, if we're objectively looking at it, there's nothing inherently about Mother's Day that is biblical. I mean, outside of God having maternal qualities and the, procreation of the species being important.
Yeah.
It's just weird how it became this like sacrosanct day in church land. That's now, I would say, I don't know if it still is. I think now there are more moms that I know who want to go out to brunch than go to church.
I mean, to me, that's like the best way to spend it is just time and food.
Food helps everything, though.
It is the best.
Yeah.
It's the best way to do it. So we just celebrated, I don't know whether or not to call it graduation Sunday or senior Sunday.
Kevin is trying to reclaim senior Sunday.
See, I don't think it ever left. Maybe that's just his previous church experience that they had moved away from senior Sunday, and I don't remember ever moving away from that.
We started doing graduation Sunday because at one point we're doing anybody who had graduated from college or master's program or otherwise. So it was instead of just seniors in high school, and Kevin just went all chips in on seniors in high school this year.
Sorry, other graduates, you don't matter.
We honor you, your importance. I think, it's one of those things of we've done it, and it's kind of cool to track the progress of people.
Oh, sure.
Most seniors in college really didn't want to come back and participate.
Do we do like gift packages and send our college freshmen and whatnot, like a care package from the church?
You know what? There was a group that did that for a really long time. I think they still do it. It's a Sunday school class. I think the FaithWorks class does it, or maybe the Faith Friends Bible Study has done it.
I don't know.
And it's always, it's a Target gift card and some candy and just kind of a feel-good home thing. So
hot dog.
Yeah. So anyway,
I remember getting those when I was in college and finding them very nice because all my friends would be like, dude, where'd you get this cool stuff? I'm like, my church.
My church is awesome. Yeah. Let me tell you about Jesus now. You too can get free packages.
It's like that unsolicited, let me force you into like me telling you about Jesus.
It was always great because like getting mail in college, no matter what it was like gold all of a sudden. Like I go to the mailroom every single day for some reason. And all it was mainly was like campus advertisements of this event is coming up. But every now and then you'd get like a postcard from somebody. And for some reason, like going away from home, being in college and getting a postcard was the most meaningful thing in the world.
I don't know. Like what my most meaningful, if there was something that was stand out, but I mean, I just remember the things that changed for me going from high school to college that were such drastic like shifts in how I approached life in general that I was like, whoa, this is a lot.
What were some of those?
For me, it was all of the sudden being able to go do whatever I wanted and not even having to have a reason or tell anybody.
Right.
It's like, oh, I think I want to go over to my friend Jason's dorm. He just got a new Xbox video game and I kind of want to watch him play it. Who am I telling this to right now? I don't actually have to tell anybody. I could just go.
I could just walk over there.
And then I can just stay there as long as he wants me to and come back at like 2:30 in the morning because the game was really interesting and he kept playing. And then some nights I'm just like, well, I'm just going to fall asleep on your dorm room floor. That's fine. And that doesn't matter. And my roommate doesn't care. And just completely unhinged amount of freedom to just do whatever and not even have to have a reason. Crazy.
Yeah.
Because in high school, every single moment of your life is essentially like mapped out. Like this is what you have to do. And your days are pretty much carved. You have all the sports that you're in or extracurricular stuff that you're like signed up for. So you have a schedule. And then in college, like you get your class schedule, but like how many hours are you taking? Are you taking 12, 14, 18 if you're crazy?
Yeah.
And so you have those, but then all the rest of the time, it's entirely up to you.
Right.
And like some of them, like the dorm that I stayed in, we had a study hall based on the way that the dorm, because it was an old hospital. And so they had this room down there that were old offices, I guess. And so they just turned those into a study hall. And you had to get a certain amount of study hours every single week. And I was like, all right. A lot of people just went down there with laptops and just watched movies. But I mean, because you have to sign in and all this stuff. But it was a great hall to live in. So it felt like a small price to pay.
Yeah.
But yeah, it just all of a sudden you just have freedom of time. And just it felt crazy to give that to a bunch of
18-year-olds.
18-year-olds, yeah.
Yeah, that was a huge kind of awakening. I remember the first time that I fully realized that I got to choose my class schedule. And it wasn't just, I'm starting at 8:15 and I'm ending at 3:30 and I'll have 4 minutes to get wherever I need to go.
Did you ever choose like any 8 a.m. classes or whatever?
I had a couple that I had. So I took a class called Major American Writers, and it was at 8:30 in the morning all the way across campus.
Oh.
And I will admit that I skipped that class a few times because it was fine. Not my favorite class in the world. So I took that as like my literature credit to get it out of the way because I had my biology plan mapped out. Yeah. So I needed to get some of those out of the way. After that, though, I had a chemistry class. It was at 9. My psychology class was at 8 or 8:30 or something like that. And that wasn't too bad. I was interested, so it wasn't as hard.
It helps when you're interested.
And it was like, the first year I was in this dorm, and it was across campus here. The psychology class, my dorm was here, and it was here. So I could literally roll out, grab a granola bar, go to class, and then go eat breakfast afterward. Just to prolong the day before. I think chemistry lab was right after that, which the worst was. So morning classes, I tended to avoid what I really, the class that was like, all right, we're going to have chemistry lab from 3 o'clock to 5:30. And it's in the dungeon of Sid Richardson Hall. So there's no light. You're kind of in that weird, I want to take a nap phase of the day. And it's super intense chemistry experiments. So you're doing all these experiments. Well, that only takes up 30 to 45 minutes of it. Then you got an hour and a half of like the synopsis of the results that you had. And it's all these numbers and concepts. So there's no light. And I'm just sitting like, I remember just falling asleep all the time in that class.
Oh my gosh. How big was the campus at TCU?
I mean, it's large. I mean, there's, including grad students, there's 7,000 students. At the time, I mean, I want to say 20 acres or I don't know. I'm not really good at
estimating. How long would it take you to get from one side to the other?
I mean, it only takes, I'm 10 minutes, 15 minutes. It's really not, it wasn't that big of a campus. It's expanded, but it was just one of those like, it's at 8:30 in the morning and I don't want to be awake at this time.
Yeah. SFA's campus, the farthest class I ever had to walk was, I think, astronomy. And that was also the only class that I would do something that was like at a weird hour because you had to go at night for the astronomy lab. But that was super cool because out in East Texas, you don't have to drive terribly far before you are out there.
Yeah.
And there's no light pollution or almost no light pollution. And they had an observatory that had one of the larger glass lens telescopes in the country. And you could go up into this thing and actually we got to look at Saturn through it and stuff, which was wild.
That's awesome.
You could see the moons. You could see the rings were as clear as day. Wow. And it was just an old school glass lens telescope. And stuff like that. I do miss just feeling like I have access to this, but I wouldn't have chosen to do it on my own, but it's a requirement. And then you do it, and then it becomes this like super cool memory that you have. Like, whoa, I went to this thing.
That is one of the cool things about like going to a university that's more of a liberal arts degree or just an expansive program where you have to take certain things, or it's like the world is at your fingertips for 4 to 5 years.
Yeah.
Where there's all sorts of different things you can try. Whereas then you get your first job of your life and you don't necessarily always have the flexibility of, well, you know what? I'm going to go to an astronomy lab today. And I'm going to look at, Saturn or even.
You can always go to the Perot Museum and stuff, but it just doesn't feel the same.
It doesn't feel the same. Well, and even from the standpoint, like I was thinking spiritually, like I really enjoyed my Methodist campus ministry experience. But I also frequented the Reformed University Fellowship and the Catholic school, the Catholic club, and Baptist student ministries. And it was kind of a really interesting foray into exposure to other traditions that I had only. I mean, it was, when you're playing football with a bunch of guys in high school, they're like, yeah, I go to First Baptist Church. Who cares? Let's play football.
Yeah.
So it was a cool to have people who were super passionate about being Reformed or Presbyterian or Baptist or whatever and be invited into their space. And I remember there was one where like the praise and worship was awesome at the Reformed University Fellowship. And then the guy got up there and all he did the entire sermon was like point at each one of us and be like, you are the reason that Jesus died. Your sins nailed the cross. He nailed his hands in. And like being raised in the United Methodist Church, I've certainly heard of crucifixion and atonement and all, but I was like, I've never been blamed for Jesus's death. I feel like I'm a mostly good person and have come to appreciate what Jesus did. So there's a guy who was an RA with me who had invited me, and afterward he's like,
"You were an RA?"
I was an RA for 2 years. Yeah, It was awesome. So yeah, this guy who invited me is like, "Yo, what'd you think?" And I was like, "I mean, it was okay, but like that was kind of an intense sermon." And he goes, "What?" And I was like, "I mean, I don't think I am the one who killed Jesus." And he goes, "You have sin in your life, don't you?" I was like, "I mean, I think all of us do on some level, but some of it's kind of like the sin we're a part of, I really don't hurt a lot of people that I know of intentionally." And he goes, "It doesn't matter. You were the one who nailed Jesus' hands into the cross." And I was like, "All right, so I'm not Reformed, or at least not part of this group." I was thinking about when you were talking earlier. So I was thinking about our we had the senior speak yesterday, and when you were talking about going from high school where everything is very rigid and planned out, and all of a sudden in college there is a map, but you have to navigate the map. And a lot of people will graduate from churches and go off to college and quote unquote lose their faith or seemingly deconstruct, or it's just not regimented in their family life or whatever. It's their choice now. But I'm wondering if that is, as Paul talks about, eating meat versus drinking milk, and he talks about growing in spiritual maturity. And in Paul's lens, spiritual maturity is grace and freedom. Mm-hmm. It is free from the law, free from you have to do this to I get to do this. And I wonder if this environment of freedom spiritually even if they leave the church for a little bit, isn't one of the best things for them. Oh, sure. To not continue in a faith pattern of, well, this is just when we do it and where we do it and how we do it. I mean, I immediately plugged into the Campus Wesley when I was at SFA. It wasn't great. I kept going because I felt like it was the right thing to do. There was a much cooler
Bible church
Yeah.
On campus that did stuff that I was like, yeah, this has way more production value, and the worship, is great, and the preaching is great, and I was always just very like, I don't know how I feel about any of this at the Wesley. It just felt like a downgrade, and I still did it for my entire freshman year, but I don't know. It was an interesting thing to stay plugged in, and then I kind of slowly dipped out my sophomore year of church attendance, and then for my junior year, I came back and I just started working at Glen Lake, and so my energy was reinvigorated for church and getting connected, and then I became like one of those leaders within the church on campus. I think it was called Grace Bible Church.
Okay.
Yeah.
A lot of them are. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so it ended up working out really well, and I joined the worship band as either sometimes the electric guitar player or the drummer, never the worship leader.
Okay.
Yeah. But I definitely found that it was easier to keep going rather than to start going again. Like, because once you stopped, that was rough.
Yeah. Once you break the pattern.
Because then you're like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore.
Right.
I'm too lazy right now.
Well, and when you have freedom and you're a young person, Saturday night often doesn't end at 10 p.m. anymore. Saturday night goes until 1 to 3 or who knows, 6 a.m.
Well, luckily, Grace Bible Church, they did their college worship service on Sunday evening.
Okay. That was, yeah.
There was also food.
Like we said, food makes everything better. Yeah, University Baptist had a thing called, it was really confusing because people would walk around campus and say, yeah, I'm an 80. And I heard the number 80, but it was at 8 o'clock. So they were saying they were 80s of going at 8 o'clock. And I was just always confused about like, what is 80? There's no Bible chapter that goes to 80 outside of, well, I guess there's, Psalms or something.
Yeah, some of the Psalms.
So yeah, there was a lot of them that did. I kind of fell backwards into a Methodist church. There was a real charismatic guy that led a Sunday school class that some of my friends from campus were already going to. And it was awesome because I got mixed in with all these young adults who already had careers, who were finding their way. And then somehow I ended up on the church softball team. So I'm playing with a whole bunch of like 50 and 60-year-old guys. I did it for 3 years. It was fantastic. And it was also the biggest ego boost because I played shortstop and they were like, wow, you can really run. I was like, not compared to my peers, but compared to you.
Yeah, because I'm 22.
Right, yeah.
I went to the Nacogdoches, First Methodist Nacogdoches one time, and I almost walked out in the middle of it. It was the most aggressively traditional. Fortunately, I at least had some button-up shirts and non-ripped jeans back then. So I walked in and I had no tattoos at the time, and my ears weren't pierced or anything. So I just looked like a guy. But I went and I was like, let me check out the church, and I was just like, not for me. And that was probably those years where I was exploring churches the most, and that was something that I really ended up appreciating later in life, is that I did so much exploration while I was in college, especially even when I would come back, because my church growing up didn't really have a college program until around my junior year. They threw something together. Okay. There was a young couple that were like, they got challenged with doing it. And then all of my friends that I graduated with, we decided, all right, let's try this thing. And it was actually pretty great. But yeah, we didn't have anything the first couple of years. So when I would just come home, I would just go visit other churches around DFW and see what else there was.
Yeah. I think it's a valuable exercise because, even when you were talking about the Bible church, there was I went to Arlington Heights United Methodist, and there was a contemporary service on Fridays that was at 5:30. It was awesome. It was actually, ironically, it was led by the guy that I'm following at Arlington. He was the youth pastor at the time going to Bright Divinity School and started up this. He was kind of like told to start this service on Friday.
That's crazy.
And so they did it at 5:30, and that way you were done in time to do your dinner and go out and do your Friday plans. It was awesome. So they had that, but then I went to traditional. So I actually went to two because I'm that person of like, it's Sunday morning, I must go to church. But I really enjoyed the church. But the big church nearby was Christ Chapel Bible Church. And that was where, like, if you were a TCU student, you went to Christ Chapel Bible Church. And they had phenomenal music. I mean, it was weird because they like met in this weird, almost mosque looking tent. They had a main building that they did like a traditional service in, but then the more college focused thing was in this like temporary, it really does look like a mosque tent. And I remember going one time, and it was the weird juxtaposition between the music is phenomenal. People are so exclusive. It was just the most unwelcoming thing. And they literally, because it was so TCU oriented, and TCU is a heavily fraternity sorority campus, the blocks of seating were by fraternity and sorority. So I walk in as literally by myself. Nobody greets me. I mean, it was a terrible experience. This is also the church that, and since we're just tearing down churches right now, apparently, this is the church that I went for. Lindsay and I, when we started dating, said, well, we should go to a Bible study together. Everybody else is going to Christ Chapel. So we went to Christ Chapel on a Wednesday night, I guess, because they had this really great praise and worship service on Wednesday. And we still went to that. But we decided, okay, we're going to go to the Bible study ahead of time. And we walk in planning on doing this together. And they immediately separated us out between men and women. And she went and learned that Jesus is her boyfriend until she gets married. And then her husband replaces Jesus. And I went and
people teach that.
Oh, have you never heard this? It's a whole theology that they teach young women, especially of Jesus is the man in your life. So purity culture. It's all the purity culture.
Purity culture has been statistically proven that it does not work.
It doesn't work, and it's harmful for marriages later on. Yeah, I mean, the guy who like really started it is like profusely apologized. So the theology is essentially Jesus is the man in your life. You give your heart to Jesus and to keep yourself pure. And then you get married and you give your heart to your husband. And there's this weird disconnect that's not in the literature, but it's like, so what happened to Jesus? Like, if I'm giving my heart completely, if I'm submitting to my husband, well, Jesus has had my heart this long. Does Jesus not keep coming on? And
oh my gosh.
And so that's where it became very toxic in marriages, is these women who had devoted themselves like in this, like, Jesus is the man in my life. Well, now my husband is, so I'm going to give everything I gave to Jesus to my husband. Well, then the husband turns out to not be Jesus after all. And they're just, their expectations are shattered. The expectations for marriage, and then the husband can never live up to that. So it's this really thing. So she did that. I walked in and they handed us a like 25-page fill in the blank workbook that was on John Calvin's Institutes. I may have told this story before, and it was fill in the blank. So they're going in there just reading, and we're supposed to sit there and fill in the blank of this, 1700s textbook. And forget when Calvin was in ministry, and I remember asking, I just said, oh, hey, I'm curious about this. I've heard something different before. And they're like, this is not the time to ask questions. So we both walked out, and I was afraid that like she had this amazing experience and I just hated it. And so I was kind of quiet, and she goes, how was it? And I said, honestly, I don't really want to come back. And she goes, oh no, we're never coming back. Like never, ever. Hers was, I think, worse than mine.
That is, there's so many things that the church was notoriously terrible, not bad, terrible at teaching, and relationships, sex, any kind of, here's what it's supposed to look like. We were so bad in the 90s at teaching that. Is it like basically just abstinence only was the refrain from, it's like if you're dating, like leave room for Jesus, that like all that stuff, or I'm dating Jesus until it's like, in what way is any of this helpful at all?
Well, and shame around. Like abstinence as a practice is not a bad practice from a relationship, like especially when you're young and not emotionally developed, but it was done in such a shame way of, like, I knew people in college who had not kissed until their wedding day because physical touch was such a shameful devil thing to do. I mean, people who didn't hold hands because it could lead to temptation. And
I found out that somebody that I knew quite well that I used to work with was the husband, who's one of the coolest people. But he was like, he grew up in this household where it was just anything outside of just like gazing at your partner, the person you're dating, is a sinful, shameful thing. Like, how dare?
Right.
I'm like, that.
Right. Yeah. That's biblical. There's nothing about it. I mean, certainly David got in trouble by gazing, right? At least
He did something about it.
He did something about it, but
hey, send that guy to the front lines. Let's see if I can kill him without actually killing him.
Right. I just think, I mean, so I knew a woman who was in this just deep, deep, deep purity culture, and everything you're told is that sex or physical intimacy is just, it's awful. It's terrible. It'll shame you. It'll ruin you. God will turn his face upon, from you. And then all of a sudden you get married and it's like, all right, all bets are off. Like everything's open.
It's just like, sex is bad, sex is bad, sex is bad, sex is bad. Just kidding. Now it's okay.
Right. But
then we expect you to know what to do with that.
Well, you don't know what to do. And then like there's never been a sexual education class.
Yeah. Not since fifth
it's
grade.
Like incredibly awkward. But then it was this, like, I remember she said, like, we had our honeymoon night and I felt awful. Like I felt like I had just sinned because for whatever 24 years of my life, all anybody told me is that this was a sinful action. And so it really broke down their relationship early on because he had not, I guess he had grown up in that, but his expectation is like, yeah, we're going to do it. Yeah. And she just like, especially as a woman, had been told like, if you do this, you are just Jezebel. I mean, over and over again. So it's just we did human sexuality so awful in the church. I really did a lot of harm.
Yeah. There's so many relationships that I know that were just unhealthy for years, and it's arguably like entirely like the church and the parents who were trusting the church, and the church absolutely let everybody down. And I'm sure it stems from some just bad theology or something, or a person who had their own guilt to try and manage and then just pushed this agenda. But
probably a combination. I mean, there's plenty in Paul's letters of sexual purity, but a lot of them are based in the end of the world is coming, and therefore don't engage in actions that are considered not important to the end of the world.
Dude,
or heaven.
I struggle with Paul a lot. Paul says so many things, or is attributed to Paul, so many things that are just so aggressive. And I'm just like, that's not real. Like in Bible study yesterday, one of the things that was brought up in the video that we were watching was the whole pray without ceasing. I'm like, really? Without ceasing. Just that's you've set everybody up for failure. Great job. Like that's not a realistic, because that's in what, 1 Thessalonians?
I think so.
And
maybe Philippians.
That's even debated who actually wrote it. It's attributed to Paul.
Now, Thessalonians is one of the ones that they're pretty sure.
They're pretty sure?
Yeah, the 1st and 2nd Thessalonians are like early on.
Oh, I'm thinking Timothy.
Timothy is the one that's kind of like, maybe this is Paul, maybe it's not.
Probably not.
Yeah, because there's a lot of things. Well, like, and so especially the early on letters of Paul, I mean, there's plenty around sexual immorality because of the way the Roman Empire was doing things and the harm that was coming from the sexual immorality of the Roman Empire. But in those, it's very much like the Christian attitude of, like in 1 Thessalonians, it's like almost put your head down, don't get in trouble because Jesus is coming and it's all going to be okay. And a lot of the teaching is around this, around the second coming, imminent second coming. And then you get into Timothy and otherwise, they're like, okay, so either Paul is like, all right, I realize I was wrong and we need to do some things differently here, or Paul died and there are people who are his teacher, his followers, his students are doing what a lot of people did. And they're writing in his name because, well, the second coming didn't come in the next, 2 months, and we got to figure out how this looks, and we're doing our best here. So that's where women should be silent, is at least one of the times is in there in 1 Timothy, and where we get some other, like what a requirement of an elder is as we're setting up a church. And I'm pretty sure Paul could care less about setting up a church. He was planting churches, but it was communities who were getting ready for the second coming of Christ.
Right. I just stuff like that, and it's so odd to think about the fact that back then everything was so disconnected, and so Paul could have died, and word could have not gotten around for a very long time. And so the fact that people are just like, I'm definitely Paul. Mm-hmm. Also, here's how I feel about this. And then just be able to, influence something. Mm-hmm. And then it's still thousands of years later, we're trying to go, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and that's where it's interesting. Like, so that's not unique to the Bible. People did it with philosophers and other teachers and rabbis, and so it's really not unique. And certainly, they weren't thinking about historians in 2025 trying to make sense out of all this.
Just like
they were so rude.
I think that's almost a unique phenomenon for our now culture, is that we consider things like, I wonder what people are going to look back and see all of what we're doing now in like 500 years, and what that's going to be, and what life is going to be like then, and how they're going to review what we have here. And I don't think that they had the foresight for that at the time. I'm sure somebody did, but it didn't seem prevalent in their writing or art or anything where they were trying to anticipate what was coming.
Right. The other interesting thing, and this is like, I don't know, we've gone all sorts of different ways, but it's like Josephus, Tacitus, Pliny, like we have biblical, like outside the Bible historians who seem fixated on making sure people knew the story. But what is wildly apparent is they all have a massive agenda.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, Josephus especially has a massive agenda. And what's fascinating is when you're trying to make a point out of something, like someone will eventually say, well, they all had an agenda. And this idea of objectivism that comes in the 18th century Enlightenment, we have been influenced by that to assume that like either all science or all history is objective, when in reality, everybody who writes a textbook is writing it from some perspective.
It's impossible not to.
Yeah.
It's just, you can even try and be just so intentional about, I'm including all the necessary information. What's necessary? Like, but you can't include every ounce of information, because then it just reads like a math book.
Right.
And you're just like, this is unreadable. So how do you approach that? So there has to be some sense of editing, some sense of perspective, so that it is palatable.
I was going to say the founding of America would take 2 years of history class if it was really going to be like, we're going to take all the perspectives on this and teach you everything, instead of we're going to do this in about 4 weeks.
Yeah,
because that's what the curriculum details.
I mean, we all every ounce of history is told from a point of view, and it's, you just have to kind of try and decide, is this a healthy one?
Right.
Because not everything is going to be just this agenda-based thing, but there is still perspective, and perspective doesn't tell an entire story. It tells a perspective of the story.
Right. Well, and to circle back around a little bit, like that's one of the reasons why I don't know if everybody needs to go to college. I mean, obviously not everybody does. One of the reasons why I find them valuable is because they are like a community of hyper-focused people.
Yes.
And so whereas we get like a smattering, we get the charcuterie board of everything, they're hyper-focused on, the prosciutto or the cheese or something, so that we can get closer to the actuality of biology or history or music or whatever it might be. So that's where I find them, even if you're going to be a plumber, you don't need to go to college, and you can make a great living and be awesome. But I'm glad we have these institutes of higher learning that are super focused on things.
Yeah, my opinion on that has changed drastically over the years.
Oh, yeah.
Because that was another thing that we did kind of poorly in the 90s, is all the parents were conditioned to, you have to go to college. You have to go to college. And that was something that even I grew up in that. And while my parents were very supportive, that was still a mantra that you have to go to college. You have to go to college. You have to go to college. And it it didn't pan out the way that we were all led to believe it would. And so my opinions on higher education are very different than they were back in the early 2000s. And I like to think that it's more complex and people kind of see more angles, but there's still that expectation. And I get the expectation, but I don't think that everybody should be forced into feeling that way.
Yeah, I think it's a great tool. It's a great tool for those who need to go and have a more specialized education than a trade program or a job or something like that.
So on the notion of education and you being at TCU, so what is a class that you took that you're like, man, if I could recommend this class that has nothing to do with your major probably, what would be that class that you're like, I took racquetball or I took...
I did take racquetball.
I loved racquetball in college.
Racquetball. So that was the one... Not a lot of people go into college playing racquetball.
And a lot of people come out.
A lot of people come out, but I had learned... my senior pastor at First Allen and then another guy were really good racquetball players. So when I had an early release day or when I got done playing football and I could go on Wednesdays early, I played every Wednesday with them. And so they beat the snot out of me.
Oh, yeah.
But by being beat, I got really good. So all of a sudden I show up as a freshman and enter into the racquetball tournament. And the first guy I play as a senior, and I think I skunk him like 11-0 or something the first game. And he looks at me and is like, who are you? Like, so I ended up winning the racquetball tournament like several times. It was awesome.
I love that. I played against a guy who I used to go work out with him, and we would typically try and start the workout by getting loose, and we would play a few games of racquetball. And he used to be I don't remember if it's called a division, but he was a B player.
Okay.
Which you might as well be pro if you're a B. Like A player is like you could be pro. You probably are a pro on some level. But he was a B level player at his peak. And so he would play me left-handed.
Oh, my gosh.
Because he was so good that he would just skunk me 11-0 every single game. I might get a point on him, but he could just ace me.
Every time.
Three out of 4 serves, he would ace me.
Yeah.
And I just, like, he had the most deadly Z serve I've ever seen. And it drove me nuts. Because I just I'm like, I know exactly where the ball is going to land, and for whatever reason, I can still never get it. And it drove me insane. And so he would just play me left-handed and still beat me 11-2 most games. And there was one time where I got on a hot streak, and I think I had him up at the absolute best. It was like 9-2 or 9-3, and I'm like, I'm gonna finally beat him. And then he just went on this hot run, left-handed.
Yeah.
And I remember putting, when I say every ounce of energy and emotion and anything I could into getting those last 2 points, I did everything I could. I was like, this is my one chance to like actually beat him left-handed, and I couldn't do it. Absolutely drove me insane. I never actually beat him.
Yeah.
I played him for, we were working out and stuff for like a year and a half, and we played every single time, multiple games. Never beat him. Drove me nuts.
You have a lot of patience to keep going back.
I got a lot better though.
That's true.
In that process, I started occasionally would get a chance to play somebody else, and it turns out like when you are that much worse than somebody and you're constantly striving just to keep up, it forces you to accelerate your
best
own
learning tool.
Yeah. And so I've ended up, I haven't played in a while, but I would be willing to bet that there'd be some level of, oh, I remember this.
Yeah.
And I could go in and I could give somebody a run for their money, if not actually just come in and clean house on some level, depending on who I'm playing.
Right.
So racquetball.
Try
racquetball.
You should do racquetball. Everybody should take a just PE course that is complete. Like my brother took like ballroom dancing or line dancing or something at his school. Yeah. I took beginning tennis and racquetball. Took beginning golf, which was awesome. So there are 2. One was in the honors college. When I did that for 2 years, I took a history of Western civilization 1 and 2. And I think that was fascinating because it was my first foray into, all the little nursery rhymes about Christopher Columbus are not exactly the beginning of Western civilization. So we're going all the way back to ancient Greece and before, as Western civilization evolved. And so that was really I loved those classes and my professors. But there was a music class called Rock to Bach. And it was, we studied the musical complexity and theory behind and history of why for composers from Johann Sebastian Bach to the Rolling Stones to Prince, and everything in between, neoclassical. It was...
So it's like a music appreciation class. It's a music
appreciation class.
But with a cool name.
And the teacher put so much into it, and it was so captivating that it was one of those. So I remember graduating from high school, and I don't know why I remember this, but I had my old CD case I had in the car when we had CD cases.
Classic.
And there was not a single CD with a female lead singer in there, because I just always loved, I just couldn't sing along with them or whatever, and most of them were Fuel and U2 and REM or Oasis, trying to remember the other, Lifehouse.
Oh yeah.
And I remember that class was really the first I see what Madonna was doing here. I see, okay, the Stones, they're pretty good. And so it really diversified my musical experience. And now when you go through the Spotify playlist, it's like when my kids are playing a new song, all of a sudden I was like, yeah, this is pretty awesome. Instead of back in my day, we had real music.
Anybody who says that, I think, has just abstained from listening to anything written after a certain year, because I am constantly looking for new music, and it's so refreshing to be surprised by what's coming out regularly, because there's just an infinite amount of great music out there. And sure, maybe you have to sift through some pretty bad music, but there's a lot of subjectivity to it. So music appreciation.
Well, that was I just read a quote this morning that was, the secret of life is to be interested in one thing profoundly and everything else well. And it was basically along the lines of, you're going to have something that captivates you, but that's not it. There's a whole bunch of things to be interested about.
I can get on board with that.
And I think the Rock to Bach class, some of the stuff we did in chemistry lab even was just so fascinating.
I didn't take a proper chemistry course. I did astronomy, which I absolutely would recommend. Astronomy it's easy to be interested in it because it's very accessible. You walk out at night and you look up and you're like, oh yeah, there it all is.
Right.
And learning weird stuff I think we spent the first 2 or 3 lectures on the professor trying to get us to understand just how big the universe is, and using things that we can have that allow us to correlate, so that we're like, oh wow, this is insane. I remember at one point how far away the nearest sun or the star is from our sun, and if our sun was the size of a golf ball, and that's how big it is relative, we would have to drive to South Dakota or something, if our sun was a golf ball. That's how far.
That's amazing.
Or it was something like that, and I just remember being like, that is the coolest, most insane thing I've ever heard in my life. So I absolutely would encourage taking an astronomy course. You get your science credit in there, and I thought it was just insanely interesting and fascinating, and it never got old.
Cool. Well, and we didn't even touch on graduation Sunday, but great job to the seniors who spoke.
Great job.
And prayed and everything.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting episode.
That was an interesting episode. Rambled into who knows what.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to write that synopsis. So
I can't wait to see what your title is.
Thanks for hanging out.
Thanks for joining us.
Catch you next one. Peace.